I always think about, it as a sort of, the genome sort of as a book. And so we've read this book, we know about the chapters and so forth. And we know how we can combine these things. So, for example, if I were to take, a sample on the sire and a sample on the dam, I can begin to make some predictions about what's going to happen with the calf. And this is not something that people are unfamiliar with, Trent. I mean, we've been doing this since the days of Mendel Gregor, right? I mean, people have been looking at, and ranchers have been looking at good cows over the fence, and they've been measuring the performance of progeny. They've been looking at, birth weights, weaning weights, calving ease, all those kinds of things. And they've been making, decisions. So, they've sort of been looking at the end products of genetics. And the only difference is that instead of waiting for the calf to be born and that performance, now we can just simply move that decision-making process forward. So we're essentially doing what we've been doing for thousands of years in animal agriculture, which is selecting superior animals. Only now we use some quote technology to assist that.
But what I want to get to, for the purposes of explaining it to the non-farm population, and quite frankly, many farmers, I'd be willing to bet that many people that own and register Angus cattle don't truly understand what we're talking about. But we're talking about it in a very simplified form, is looking at the genetics, the DNA of the parents, the sire, the dam, and gaining a reasonable expectation on the amount of intermuscular fat, marbling, that would be in most of the offspring. And the marbling is what generates the high-quality eating experience. So we're trying to use genetics and studying DNA to increase eating satisfaction for the consumer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you're right. You've described that perfectly. Here's the other principle for your reader or for your listeners to understand. We are essentially, improving the process of selection. What we are not doing is DNA manipulation, right? We're not manipulating.
I really wanted you to get to that because we're just studying it. We're not manipulating.
Exactly. All it does is it allows us to essentially see under the hide. So the example that you gave about marbling, right? Well, if we really wanted to know marbling, we have to grow the animal up, we have to feed it out, we slaughter it, we examine the carcass attributes. With this technology, we can, actually get a very good snapshot of the animal's genetic potential to marble, based on its DNA. So we're just simply observing at a much closer level and in a much more scientific way, the selection process that cattlemen have been applying for years and years and years, and we're not actually, we're not doing anything. We're not manipulating it. We're simply just finding out what's there earlier in life and using that information to, drive mating decisions that we make every day. Ranchers make every day. Which bulls do I put on which cows, et cetera, et cetera. Now we just have tools that allow us to do that much earlier, and much more effectively.
And depending on however complex the person that owns the cattle wants to get to, it can be simply a paternity test. Everybody can relate to a paternity test, or look at that DNA and know exactly how fast that calf might grow given a standard growing environment.
Yeah, so there's a principle that your listeners probably need to understand. So we can use this technology in one of two ways, well, several ways, but simplistically think about it this way. We can use this for, quote, marker-assisted selection, a term that we refer to as marker-assisted selection. So I'm going to use the DNA technology, and I'm going to identify the animal, and I'm going to get some estimate of its true genetic merit for the purposes of breeding or selection. Okay, I'm going to identify the favorable traits to be passed on in a future generation. But I can also use it for a very simple process, which is marker-assisted management. So now, say, for example, Trent, I have a calf, and he's entering the feed yard, okay? He's not breeding prospect, right? I'm not going to be using the DNA technology to select him for breeding. But what we have been able to demonstrate is I can use that DNA technology and understand that to be able to make some predictions to maximize his performance in the feed yard. So say, for example, that calf, I genotype him and I determine that he's got very favorable genes for growth and that he needs to be fed for 140 days. His contemporary might have less favorable, and we need to feed him for 180 days. Well, without that information, the feedlot operator might have fed them both for 160 days. One of them is 20 days over, and one of them is 20 days under. One of them is insufficiently marbled, and the other one may be, sort of overfat, if you will.
And we do the same thing with our kids in school. We have the gifted kids who are in a different class at a different time of the day, getting different information, expecting different results from mainstream. We're doing that's the same exact concept.
Yep, exactly. Principle is precisely the same. And again, with the power of some of the technologies that we now have the ability to make some projections about that, and we can actually derive prediction equations. We can say if the animal weighs this amount on arrival and we want him to get to this hot carcass weight, we need to feed him for X number of days. And feedlot operators, there are groups that are already beginning to apply this technology on a fairly broad scale. And it's exciting to see, what we can do to improve the efficiency, for example, in the feed yard, to use our feed resources more appropriately. You talked about the improvements in efficiency in beef production. Just think about that. If we could take, my example of the two calves, one fed for 180 and one fed for 140, and take that feed and give it to the animal that needs it, and that animal that was finished early, get him off to market and save the efficiencies in the feed yard.
How do we keep those mainstream cattle from despising the gifted cattle like I did? I despised those gifted kids when I was in school.
Well,
you were a gifted kid, weren't you?
No, I don't think so. No, my mother wouldn't say that. So rather than think about gifted and ungifted, think about every child and every calf as having certain attributes, right? And what you really want to know is you just want to know, what is the child do? The gifted child may be great in piano, but the ungifted child may be a great sprinter, or the ungifted child may be, great with science but bad with English, So that's what we're really trying to say, is it's not about good and bad. It's simply about saying, this is what we know about the genetic potential of this animal. Knowing that, let's manage it in the most effective way. Let's make this person, a world-class sprinter, and let's make this person a great piano player. And really, that's what the focus is about.
And I can hear ranchers driving down the road screaming at their radio saying, "Ask the question! Ask him the question!" Every science and technology comes with a price. What does this cost? Oh, this sounds like a great idea, but what does it cost me at the ranch?
So if you take the example that we do, with American Angus Association, if you do a test for the Angus profile that we do for them now, I think the cost is like $60. We have a kind of a product that isn't Angus specific, that's more broadly applied. The Igenity profile, I think it sells to the rancher for about $38. So for $38, you can get a very good insight into the future performance of that calf when you have them as a day-old animal, or at weaning time at 6 months, when you have to make a keep or cull decision, a selection decision. So, that's really one of the things. This is not technology that's out of the realm or out of the reach of virtually every rancher. For that kind of investment, you can get some really good insight into future breeding stock, ideal replacement heifers, etc.
Okay, so cowboy arithmetic on the fly, which is never good with the non-gifted kids, but I got you here, so I'm okay with it. $38. Oh my goodness, that's my profit. I can hear people saying, "That's all if I made $38 on a calf, I'd be happy." But I was just sitting here doing some math. We put roughly 1,200 pounds on a beef animal. If we had the ability to identify genetics and improve feed efficiency, I'm just picking just one trait, feed efficiency, and improve that feed efficiency by 10%. So now our cost of gain is 54 cents to put on a pound of gain instead of 60 cents. So 6 cents times 1,200 pounds is nearly $100 in my cowboy arithmetic is right.
Yeah, that's correct. So there's another principle for you to think about here, and particularly people that are in the cow-calf operations, sort of contemplate that, because you make an investment. The cow-calf operator makes an investment every year with a goal of improving his herd, and we've done some modeling with the University of Missouri, which says if I use technology such as this to identify superior animals, then the favorable genes move, in a predominant direction. And what we can show you is that over time, you actually sort of get an acceleration of the benefit in your herd, because each time you're improving, the genetics of your herd.